One of the most shocking executions that occurred during the Tudor period was when Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, went to the scaffold on Tower Green. She had been found guilty of adultery, treason and other charges, along with a number of men. The men were executed on Tower Hill, but Anne was allowed the privacy of a private execution. She was not the most popular queen in history. Many women across the country despised her and saw her as a homewrecker, as Henry VIII shunned his first wife Catherine of Aragon, split from the church, and outcast Catherine just so he could marry Anne. She captivated the king's court, and when the annulment came, Henry had already married, and it was alleged that Anne was pregnant at the time. But there were many things today that remain uncertain and a mystery about Anne Boleyn, and following her death, Henry VIII sought to erase her from history. Paintings were whitewashed over, her symbols and insignia in Hampton Court were changed by carpenters, and there was a great effort made to literally rid her from history. But after her execution, there were many rumours that came out about Henry VIII's second wife, including whether she even had 6 fingers on one hand, and one of the rumours and stories tell a dark and disturbing story about what happened to her heart after her execution. It was alleged that her heart was removed from her body and was buried miles away from the rest of her remains. But what is the story of this? Remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. On the 19th of May 1536, Anne Boleyn was held inside of her quarters in the Tower of London, which had become her prison for a number of weeks since she began being held in custody. She had been accused and found guilty of adultery, incest and treason, and 5 men, including her own brother, was executed for allegedly being involved with the Queen. The truth behind the whole scandal was that the king, yet again, had become tired of his wife, and his eye had been captured at court by another woman, Jane Seymour, who would become Henry VIII's third wife, and also the woman who gave him his wish in a son and a male heir. Because of this, Thomas Cromwell spun a web of lies and deceit against Anne, and with this, Anne was sentenced to death at a trial held inside the Tower of London. To take her life, the king had brought over an executioner from France, known as the Sword of Calais, who would perform her execution with a sword rather than an axe. This was considered more prestigious and reliable than the commoner's axe. Anne had been told that she was due to die that day, and was taken from her rooms and was taken to the scaffold, which had been created on the north side of the White Tower, the central part of the Tower of London, and also the oldest. She was dressed in a red petticoat, and 2 female attendants accompanied her on a final walk from the Queen's House or the Cold Harbour Tower to the scaffold. She was noted for being rather positive, for someone who would meet her end within the hour. She was led and helped up the stairs, and she then spoke to the crowd. She gave a long speech to the advisers who were gathered, and around 200 people, and stated, "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, for according to the law, and by the law I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that, whereof I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor more merciful prince was there ever. And to me he was ever a good and gentle sovereign lord. And if any person will meddle with my cause, I require them to judge the best, and thus I take my leave of the world, and you all, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me. O Lord, have mercy on me, to God I commend my soul." She then made her final preparations for her death. She removed her headdress and tucked her hair under a coif, and finally said goodbye to her ladies. These had been assigned to her inside the tower, and it's believed that these were spies employed by Cromwell to inform on any piece of intelligence. She then said a final prayer, and the swordsman then readied himself. He hid his sword from Anne, and as she was knelt down and she had a blindfold over her eyes, he moved around on the scaffold and then drew out his sword to gasps, before he quickly and swiftly took her head, clean off in one blow, from his sword. He then did not hold up Anne's head, and made off with her gown, leaving rather quickly, before Anne's ladies gathered her remains inside of an oak chest that held bow staves. Some across England mourned Anne Boleyn, and believed that she would be a queen in heaven, but others believed that she was simply a traitorous woman who had led the king astray. But the image of the Queen of England lying dead upon the orders of her husband the king was a brutal and shocking thing, and following this the king tried to erase her from history. As mentioned, paintings were seized of Anne, and other elements of her life were whitewashed, but many rumours emerged about her. But one of the most shocking rumours about Anne Boleyn concerns one of her vital organs, and what happened to this after her head was taken clean off. Cutting organs from the body, especially hearts, was common during the Tudor period and throughout the centuries. For example, a number of writers, such as Thomas Hardy, outlined that after his death his heart would be buried in a different place to his body. But Henry VIII's third wife, Jane Seymour, allegedly had her heart cut out of her body during the embalming process, and she had this buried under the altar of Hampton Court, whilst her body was buried at Windsor Castle. After her execution, a number of stories came out about Anne Boleyn's body, and whether it was taken from the Tower of London, where it was buried quickly inside the chapel of St Peter ad Vincula. Some people believe that her remains are actually buried in other places. Anne herself and her family were strongly linked to Suffolk and also Norfolk, counties a fair way from London. Many people at the time thought that her remains would be released to her family, and that they would have been then taken back to lands formerly held by the Boleyns, where they were then buried. Other stories were linked to specific parts of her body, and in particular her heart. It was claimed that Anne Boleyn's heart was cut and taken from her body following her execution, and then this was then taken from the Tower of London, and then was buried inside of St Mary's Church in Erwarton in Suffolk. It was claimed that Anne had stated to her ladies that her heart should be buried in this specific church after her death, as her heart remained close to her family's seat of power. The rumour of Anne's heart in the church emerged during the Tudor period, and her uncle Sir Philip Colthorpe, who had married Anne's aunt, owned the original Tudor mansion that stood close by to the church. It was believed that as a young girl, Anne Boleyn spent a lot of time here and loved playing and relaxing in the lands around the church. It was stated that she was happiest when she was at this Tudor house and mansion, that her best times were spent with her aunt and uncle at the hall. So this could have been why she had dictated that her heart was to stay there. But following Anne's execution, many do believe that her heart was removed from her body and was taken to St Mary's Church in Suffolk. It would have had to have been smuggled out of the Tower of London possibly for this, as Henry VIII would never have allowed this to happen. But there could have been some truth to the rumour, as in the 19th century, the church was having work completed on it. It was then stated that below the organ, a small heart-shaped lead casket was unearthed, and inside of this dust was found. It was believed that this could have contained the rotten decaying matter of Anne Boleyn's heart. In terms of how true this story is, some historians do doubt its authenticity, and do claim that it's probably unlikely. Henry VIII made big efforts to ensure that people forgot about Anne Boleyn, and he would never have given permission for his wife to have had her heart removed and then buried elsewhere. But some locals do believe that the small lead box actually contained the heart of Anne Boleyn. But during the Victorian times, Anne Boleyn's body was allegedly unearthed and was found inside of the chapel of St Peter ad Vincula. There was no record of her heart being found, this would have perished over the centuries, but her remains were allegedly identified, and it was noted she had a small neck, and this confirmed a rumour around the time of her execution. It was noted that her head was not attached to her body, and confirmed the execution had been performed by a sword. But the stories and rumours of Anne Boleyn today still remain divisive and captivate people all around the world. Last time I visited the Tower of London, I went inside the chapel where she is buried, and there inside was a beefeater or yeoman warder. He was having a quiet moment of reflection and a prayer at the grave of Anne Boleyn, where a single rose stood on a grave marker. It's clear that Anne Boleyn has a powerful and prominent legacy in the minds of many still today. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.